Welcome back into another edition of Prime Sports World. I'm, of course, your host, David On Point Huppin. Thank you very much for joining us for Fantasy Football Weekly. On this week's episode of the show, we're going to give you our rankings for week number 11. Hopefully, you guys are all doing well in your fantasy football leagues. I won all of my matchups last week but one. Shout out to David Jules, who put up 150 points against me in my fantasy football league, the one that I'm the commissioner of, the greatest people. But yeah, tough week at the office. They beat me pretty easily. I had the tournament. Actually, if I had played anybody else but him, I would have beaten him. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast if you like what we're doing here at Prime Sports World. And if you have any questions or comments as we go through the show, please drop those down in the comment section. I love fan interaction. If you happen to be watching this on Facebook, or if you're watching this on YouTube, or you're watching this on the Twitch, I'll answer your questions as I get to them. I always have the comments, so looking at that stuff. So please give us some shout outs here at Prime Sports World. And without further ado, let's get into the show. Let's first talk about injuries. Notable week injuries. We're heading into week number 11. I hate when I have stuff like this airs. Let's start with the positive side. Joe Burrow. Injury update. So he's been activated as a designated to return, which means he could return in the next 3 weeks or so. So, I mean, if you have the ability and you have the IR slot available and you want to stash Joe Burrow, he could become available in the fantasy football playoffs. Obviously, this has a lot to do with how this next couple of weeks go for the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, they're probably not going to bring Joe Burrow back if they're way out of it. So, I mean, I would keep it, but if you have the ability to and you can stash him on your IR spot, I think that's absolutely worth doing. If you have you need a quarterback, if you're kind of streaming week to week, you could add a Joe Burrow, and he could be somebody that you play and plug and play for the remainder of the season, especially in the fantasy football playoffs. So that's something to keep in mind there in fantasy. Let's talk about J.K. Dobbins, one of the lone bright spots for Denver in their very sloppy victory against the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday Night Football. But he came up awkwardly with an injury. Seems to be some sort of hip drop variety injury. He came back into the game, and then he was able to finish the contest. And then he talked about injuries afterwards. He's going in for a second evaluation. So it's something to keep an eye on. He's been really good when he's been healthy. But RJ Harvey is somebody to keep an eye on. Probably somebody who's already owned in many fantasy formats. So he's probably not somebody you can just pick up and go. But other guys, if you're looking for some depth, if J.K. Dobbins was to miss a considerable amount of time, Jalen McLaughlin, running back there, veteran running back, and Tyler, I think it's Bidet. It could be splitting carries. So he could be somebody who has some sneaky value, especially if, God forbid, RJ Harvey were to get injured. Somebody definitely worth taking a flyer on. And then Bam Knight has been a kind of a refreshing piece there in Arizona at the running back position, dealing with an ankle injury right now after he was not good at all in that game against the Seattle Seahawks. So if you're looking for some guys to replace him, Amari DiMercato, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals, had a pretty solid day of the offense against the Seattle Seahawks. And was mostly a forgettable performance for that entire offense, but he was solid, 10 fantasy points. And then Michael Carter was the starter when Trey Benson went down, and then he had his own injury, but he seems to be back at full health. Could be somebody you can pick up and start. And then Trey Benson, if he's available in waivers, I mean, he could literally return to the lineup at any point, really. I know he's in IR, but he could return at any point. He's designated for a return, but he hasn't practiced at all since he got hurt. So we'll see what happens with him. But it might be somebody worth taking a flyer on, because I think he becomes the starter whenever he returns back from that lineup, that injury that he had earlier this season after James Conner got injured. Then Garrett Wilson seemed to re-aggravate whatever that knee injury that he had, is expected to miss potentially some time. If you're looking for somebody to replace the tight end Mason Taylor, the tight end, and then the running back Isaiah Davis, and then if you're looking in the super deep fantasy leagues, Tony Mitchell, somebody they got back in the Sauce Gardner trade, is somebody that you could plug and play. As you know, Garrett Wilson could miss some time. I think he's projected to miss 2 to 3 weeks. So Tony Mitchell outside of that, he was on his way to having a good fantasy day before he fumbled that ball through the back of the end zone a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now, for the Indianapolis Colts. In that game, they ended up losing to the Rams. And then Marvin Harrison has, I think, an emergency appendicitis. So he now is going to miss the game against the San Francisco 49ers. And if you're looking for somebody on his own team to kind of plug and play, Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch could be guys that you could kind of get by with. Michael Wilson immediately becomes wide receiver 1. And an offense that's probably going to get down in that game against the Niners. And so they're going to be looking to throw the football. Outside of Trey McBride, they're going to need somebody else to step up. Michael Wilson could be that guy. And then Dalton Kincaid left that game against the Miami Dolphins early after was having a pretty solid day at the office, but then, obviously left with the injury. Dawson Knox is the guy you're probably going to want to plug and play and start. Dalton Kincaid not practicing currently, or at least did not practice today. So just keep an eye on his availability. Dawson Knox, if you own Dalton Kincaid, you might just have Dawson Knox on your bench so you can just swap him out. Because he's a good tight end. He's a good football player. So that's just something you can keep in mind there. Injury front, not as bad as it's been in other weeks when it comes to injuries. So count your stars because we'll see how week number 11 plays out. Let's talk about quarterbacks, though. My number 1 quarterback is Drake May going up against the New York Jets tomorrow night. I think that's a good matchup for Drake May. He should be able to put some pretty good numbers. Dak Prescott going against the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. Dak Prescott is coming off that bye as well, so you get everybody kind of healthy on that lineup. Matthew Stafford has been on an absolute heater. And I know that's kind of maybe more of a tougher line matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, but I think Stafford, if you own him, he's been so good over the last 6 weeks. You have to start him. For Lamar Jackson going up against the Cleveland Browns, should be a good day at the office for Lamar Jackson. He always seems to feast against this lineup. 5, Josh Allen looking to bounce back after what was kind of a pedestrian Josh Allen game in week number 10. 6, Justin Herbert. His rushing numbers just keep his value so steady. And I'm going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just let Davis Mills light them up in the fourth quarter. I don't need to say anything else. Sam Darnold going up against the Los Angeles Rams. All those weapons, all that offensive output. Sam Darnold is the engine that makes that go. Caleb Williams at number 8. The dude has been just awesome in fantasy over the last couple of weeks because they've kind of just taken the shackles off him. They're really chucking around. And Caleb Williams has really benefited when it comes to the fantasy football production. Going up against the Giants team, or not Giants team, the Minnesota Vikings. That secondary is kind of sussed. Then Baker Mayfield going up against Josh Allen. We kind of saw what Tua did last week. I would know that most of that was done through the running game. But Emeka Egbuka has another opportunity to get healthy. So Baker Mayfield should have a good day at the office there against Buffalo. And then Jalen Hurts at number 10 going up against the Detroit Lions. That's on Sunday Night Football. That should be a good game. That should potentially be a high-scoring game against the Eagles and the Lions. But I did say that last week about the Packers and the Eagles, and I could not have been more wrong about that prediction. So Jalen Hurts, number 10. And then my outside looking in, I got Aaron Rodgers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. He had a good game at the office last time these two teams played. This game is in Pittsburgh. That Bengals defense has only gotten worse since the last time these two teams played. And then Geno Smith. I know he had a really not a terrible day at the office against the Denver Broncos, but the Dallas Cowboys is not the Denver Broncos defense. There's going to be points to be had there for Geno Smith and Brock Bowers, who also had a tough day at the offense this most recent week against Denver. And then Patrick Mahomes, the second. Probably lower on Patrick Mahomes than the consensus, but that Denver defense is for real. And I think that's going to be tough sledding for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City the offense, especially if PSW comes back. Look for Patrick Mahomes to kind of struggle in this game just a little bit. He is coming off that bye, and I'm sure Andy Reid has all sorts of interesting plays in that Rolodex of his. And then sneaky and daily, I got Aaron Rodgers at 5,400. Yeah, that's a really cheap price for a starting quarterback going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I know there was a lot of frustration with this offense last week, but this is the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I think Aaron Rodgers should be able to put up some points here against that defense. If he doesn't, this might be one of those situations where, he may just be finished. I don't know. As being a fantasy relevant player. From the quarterbacks, we got our running backs. I got Christian McCaffrey at number one. I do expect Mac Jones to get the start for the San Francisco 49ers for this week again. So Christian McCaffrey, as long as Jonathan Taylor is going to be on a bye, Chris McCaffrey is probably the guy you want to start. He's wide receiver, running back number one. Devon Achane, we saw what going up against the Washington Commanders. We saw what Jahmyr Gibbs was able to do against that defense last week. We saw what Devon Achane just did last week against the Buffalo Bills. So it should be a really good day at the offense for Devon Achane as well, as he's just been on kind of a heater the last few weeks. Kind of actually since I called him out and not having a great season, he's been basically incredible since then. So, what do I know? Going on from there, we got Bijan Robinson. I don't expect Tyler Algier to hawk 3 touchdowns for him this week. Look for him to get into the end zone again. Josh Jacobs for the going up against the New York Giants. I think the running game is going to be something they're going to lean on there for the Green Bay Packers, especially since it does seem like Romeo Doubs is going to miss this game. And, they haven't – we saw what that offense looked like without Tucker Kraft and Romeo Doubs last weekend against the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll see. But I think Josh Jacobs is one of those steady contributors that you can just plug and play and bank on it. James Cook the third. Travion Henderson had himself a field day against this defense for Tampa Bay. James Cook is as talented or more talented than he is. So look for him to have a good game. Saquon Barkley at number 6. Kind of just a pedestrian game against Green Bay. He was kind of saved by that long screenplay that went for 40 yards. But this should be a good game for him for Detroit. Going up against Detroit. Not a great run defense for the Detroit Lions. And then back-to-back, I got Jahmyr Gibbs, who he's going to be going up against in that game. Josh Jacobs still had a good game. He still got to the end zone against this defense. Jahmyr Gibbs, more talented than Josh Jacobs at this current moment. So look for him to have a good game as well. And I think he's basically matchup-proof at this point. 8, Javonte Williams, another great story for the Dallas Cowboys. He's kind of revitalized his career there a little bit. Going up against the Las Vegas Raiders defense is not good at all. So Javonte Williams should have a good day there. And then Kyron Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. Nobody else is getting touches there for the running back position for the Rams. So he's a must start in all formats. So continue rolling the dice on him. And then Travis Etienne Jr. I think, Jaylen Warren was able to pop off some runs there against that Los Angeles Chargers defense. Look for Travis Etienne to have similar, if not the same kind of production that you saw at Jaylen Warren. Hopefully he can get into the end zone. And then from there, I got my outside looking at it. I got Rachaad White at number 1 in that scenario. Bucky Irving probably, I know he returned to practice yesterday in kind of in a limited fashion, but I still don't think he's going to play in this matchup. I am a little bit concerned that Sean Tucker, the other running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, has been eating into his carries just a little bit. And Sean Tucker arguably has been the more effective running back than Rachaad White. But I would say Rachaad White does have the value in passing passes out of the backfield. Sean Tucker doesn't give you any of that. That's why he's still in my outside looking in. But this is an offense that desperately needs Bucky Irving back. Let's be real. Then Woody Marks, first time a young man, actually to both these guys. First time making it into my rankings, the Travion Henderson and Woody Marks, both coming off pretty good games at the office against Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, respectively. So look for that, continue that momentum for both these two young men, as they're both rookies and both had kind of their coming out party last week against the Jaguars and the Buccaneers. And then my sneaky and daily options, I got Devin Singletary at 4,600 and Amari DiMercado, as I kind of talked about, touched on briefly earlier in the show. 4,500 could be the starting running back for the Arizona Cardinals, especially if Bam Knight is unable to play. And Douglas Singletary still is in a kind of an interesting timeshare with Tyron Tracy Jr. I know that's a pretty stout defense he's going up against in the Green Bay Packers, but maybe Devin Singletary can get some value out of the passing, out of the backfield. I think at 4,600, it's worth the dice roll. Moving on from there, my wide receiver rankings part 1. So I got my number 1 wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, has been the number 1 wide receiver for majority of the season. I don't necessarily, if he hadn't I think he got banged up a little bit in that game against the Arizona Cardinals. And he could have had a monster game. He's still on record to break a bunch of records, including Calvin Johnson's receiving yards record. Then Nico Collins, he had a monster game with Davis Mills as quarterback. I expect C.J. Stroud to return under center, but Nico Collins did have a good day at the office. Drake London, number 3, it's becoming more and more matchup proof, really. He had a great looking crazy touchdown against the Indianapolis Colts. CeeDee Lamb coming off that bye, going up against a bad Las Vegas Raiders. Even Puka Nacua should be good to go in this game against the Seattle Seahawks. This should be high scoring affair between the Rams and the Seahawks. It's important to note also Devontae Adams dealing with a bit of a hip injury or like an oblique injury of some sort. He did not practice today, but Sean McVay has announced that he will play in their game against the Seahawks. How limited how he's going to be, I would temper my expectations if I'm a Devontae Adams owner. I know he went off big time before that injury last weekend against the San Francisco 49ers. I think he had 2 touchdowns, but yeah, came up a little bit limpy at the end of that game. Number 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. They're probably going to draw Quinton Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo, who has just been an absolute blanket when it comes to the cornerback position. But the talent is too valuable, and I think the offense is too engaged, too ignition to bench Amon St. Brown at this point in his fantasy day. And then Jamar Chase, number 7, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A little bit lower than probably the consensus and normally what people have of Jamar Chase. But I don't know. I will see. I'm probably too low on him. If I'm being completely honest with Rashee Rice, that's the wide receiver pass catching talent that I want out of Kansas City this week outside of Travis Kelce. I would temper my expectations a little bit because I think PS2 is going to return for this game and should be blanketing Rashee Rice for majority of the contest. And then Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings going up against my Chicago Bears as they look to bounce back off of that loss to the Baltimore Ravens. And Justin Jefferson kind of just an okay game against the Ravens. He's going to look to get back into form, kind of build that rapport with JJ McCarthy in this game. And then Emeka Egbuka, I don't think we need to say too much, although I do think he's going to draw Maxwell Harrison at the defensive back position. So that could be an interesting matchup, rookie on rookie, Big Ten versus SEC. Big 12, Kentucky? The Big 12, I think, actually. But Emeka Egbuka is to be somebody that, he's been awesome this season. He's finally getting healthy. So he should have a good day at the office for Emeka Egbuka. And then my outside looking in, I got Rome Odunze of my Chicago Bears going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Bounced back nicely off that goose egg the week prior. I think he's a plug and play for the rest of the season. Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. He's the best receiver on the football team. And then Jalen Waddle quietly has had a really nice fantasy season as he has a touchdown in back-to-back weeks. And we got a question here on the Twitch. Thank you, Vicky, Vivi. Mojito? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm trying. Vivi Mojito. Somebody offered me Troy Franklin and Theo Johnson for Zach Ertz and Jordan Addison. I would make that trade. I think Zach Ertz has more value than Theo Johnson. I think Jordan Addison has more value than Troy Franklin. I would 100% make that trade. If you're the one getting Zach Ertz and Jordan Addison, I would definitely 100% make that trade. But yeah, let me know down in the comment section what you think about this trade. Let me put it up. Oh, the other way around. I wouldn't do that. I mean, how many teams? Is this a 16-team league or a 14? Let me put the trade on there. 10-team league. No, I don't think I would. Because Troy Franklin, because once Marvin Mims comes back off his injury, I do really like Theo Johnson, but once. And especially now with the Jackson Dart injury and kind of being questioned if what his status is going to be especially for this week. I think I would still rather have Zach Ertz and Jordan Addison for the remainder of the season than Theo Johnson and Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin, to be honest with you, outside, I'm not sure he's worth owning in a 10-team league. Especially with how putrid that passing attack has been over the last couple of weeks. And I know there's a rapport there with Joe Nix, but I wouldn't make that trade. That's just me. But hopefully that works out for you. But that's my honest opinion on it. I wouldn't make that deal. And then my sneaky daily there at the wide receiver position, I got Michael Wilson at 3,800, and I got Jaden Higgins at 3,500 as well. Has a touchdown in every other week. I know he had a touchdown last week, but going up against a bad Titans team, I think Jaden Higgins is going to have a good day at the office. And Michael Wilson, as I kind of talked about earlier, at 3,800, he's probably going to be wide receiver one. Will be wide receiver one with Maserati Marv going to miss the game against the San Francisco 49ers, and so Michael Wilson's got to step up and be kind of in that role. From the wide receivers, let's talk about them bulkier pass catchers. I got my number one. I got Trey McBride, the tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. Also is matchup proof. He's a plug and play, forget it for the remainder of the season. Brock Bowers, same deal. I know he had a down week against the Denver Broncos on Thursday night a week ago, but I mean, I think if you're going up against him, if you against the Dallas Cowboys, I think Brock Bowers is going to have a good game. He will have a good day at the office. Rondé Gadsden, the second, avoided a major injury that people thought was going to be like a torn ACL, but he's already back to practice. So if you own Rondé Gadsden or you picked him up off waivers at the beginning of the season, you kind of been riding him as your tight end. Thank God he didn't suffer some sort of serious injury. Rondé Gadsden, the second, is a good tight end and will be for the remainder of the season. And kind of, if you look at my rankings when it comes to tight end, I kind of like the first three guys are like the new guard, and then the next three guys are like my old guard, with Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, and Travis Kelce at 4, 5, 6, respectively, as those guys continue to be stalwarts when it comes to fantasy production. And then number 7, I got Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, coming off that bye. 8, Sam Laporta going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Mark Andrews, who only seems to catch touchdowns. Same thing with Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. And then my outside looking in, I got a Kyle Pitts Sr. Of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Carolina Panthers. Zach Ertz, who I kind of just talked about here on the show. He has a touchdown, I think, in 3 straight weeks. It still seems to be somebody that Marcus Mariota is absolutely looking for at the tight end position. And I think he's probably, I'm probably too low on Zach Ertz, to be totally honest with you. And then Bobby Schultz's cousin, shout out Bobby Schultz. Dalton Schultz comes in here at number 13. Whoever the quarterback is, I mean, he's just been a target machine over the last couple of weeks, and I think he's somebody you have to start in all formats. And then my sneaky and daily, I got Dawson Knox at 3,300. This is an asterisk to it. If Dalton Kincaid does not play, which I do not expect him to play, he is somebody that I would absolutely be looking to play at 3,300. He used to, before Dalton Kincaid got into the picture, he had a really good rapport with Josh Allen. And speaking of Allen, I had Davis Allen as my other sneaky and daily tight end. Has had near double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. He's 2,500 fantasy points, which is really, really cheap. He's somebody that if I play in a sneaky a day, I think Davis Allen has some value there, especially since the heater that Matthew Stafford has been on. And he seems to be really looking for his tight ends, especially in the red zone over the last few weeks. So I think Davis Allen is somebody that I would absolutely look to start in daily formats. And then from our defense, from our offense, we're going to swing on to the other side of the football, and we're going to talk about defense. Number 1 defense, the Houston Texans going up against a bad Titans offense. The New England Patriots going up against the New York Jets tomorrow night. The Ravens going up against Dylan Gabriel and the the Cleveland Browns. The Packers going up against potentially Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson and the New York Football Giants. I think all 4 of those are fantastic matchups. I think you get a little more murky when it comes to the rest of these defenses. The Chiefs, we've seen what this Denver Broncos offense has looked like over the last month or so. It's just looked putrid. And the Chiefs defense should be able to put some pressure under Bo Nix and get some, especially because they're coming off of a bye, nice and healthy. The Denver Broncos, too good of a defense to leave them outside of my top 10 or even the top 8 here. Dallas Cowboys going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. They could force some turnovers. They could look to, because Geno Smith has been a turnover machine this season. The only way this works out is if they get a touchdown at some point in the game, because I do think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. And then you also have to kind of keep in like the Kevontae Turpin factor too. So he could potentially take one to the house, and that counts for your defense and special teams when that comes to the Cowboys. So Kevontae Turpin is kind of a difference maker there for the Dallas Cowboys when it comes to defense and special teams, at least for this week. And then the Miami Dolphins going up against the Washington Commanders. I mean, we've seen what this offense looks like under Marcus Mariota. I know I just got done talking about how high I am on Zach Ertz, but this could be a tough day at the office for the Washington Commanders. And then my sneaky and daily, I got the Denver Broncos at 2,600. They're really cheap. Like usually when the Denver Broncos are like in daily, they're like one of the most expensive defenses you can play. Because they're going up against Kansas City, they're really cheap. They're 2,600. That's sneaky value when it comes to a defense this good Going up against an offense, I mean, let's be frank. I mean, it's really only been a few weeks where the offense has really been humming. I mean, we were at the beginning of the season, we were questioning how good this offense even was. So, I mean, you had Rasheed Rice, but we'll see what they look like after the bye. Denver, I think, is somebody at defense position really sneaky and good to play. But yeah, thank you very much. And but before we get up out of here, those have been my fantasy football rankings. And before we get up out of here, let's talk about the number one scoring players from fantasy football from week number 10. Anybody down in the comment section have a prediction of who actually was the highest scoring fantasy football player in week number 10? Because we had a bunch of guys who put up video game type numbers. If you have a guess, drop it down in the comment section. You know, I wish I had some music I could play. So you can kind of give you a second to make that guess. All right. Jonathan Taylor at number one with 49.6 fantasy points. Probably won a lot of people their fantasy football matchups this week. And then Devon Achane had 40 points as well. Jahmyr Gibbs had 38. And then kind of a drop off there a little bit. Travion Henderson getting his first 2 NFL touchdowns, 28 points. And then Trey McBride, who also had 127 yards receiving and 1 touchdown, had 27.7 fantasy points. And then quietly, Davis Mills, kind of out of a nowhere performance. The number one quarterback in fantasy last week was Davis Mills. So that's crazy. Like a 27.68 fantasy points, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for the game-winning touchdown for the Houston Texans. But yeah, well, before we get out of here, I got to predict who I think is going to be the number one scorer in fantasy this week. Let's see. You know, I'll go Christian McCaffrey, the running back for the San Francisco 49ers. I think Christian McCaffrey will be, when it's all said and done, when we close the book up on week number 11, Christian McCaffrey will have the highest fantasy output than any football player in the league, this week. Christian McCaffrey, you can book that. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me here at Prime Sports World. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast if you like what we're doing here at Prime Sports World. I'm, of course, your host, David On Point Huppin. Today's episode of the show, I gave you my rankings for week number 11. And here at Prime Sports World, we bring the heat. We'll be back here next week breaking down all things week number 12, along with breaking down Monday Night Football from week number 11. So yeah, just keep riding with us here at Prime Sports World as we kind of go down into the twilight part of the NFL season. Thank you very much for continuing hanging out with us. Continue giving us our comments and your concerns. If you have any questions about anything fantasy related, drop those down in the comment section. Do check that stuff later. You guys all have a good day. Take it easy. And Vivi Moshihiro, thank you very much for watching me here at Twitch. We very much appreciate your continued support. You all have a good night and take it easy.